Throughout the 1990s, Square had been consistently producing original IPs with the hopes of creating their next big franchise. But even though some high-quality games were produced, such as Chrono Trigger, Parasite Eve and Front Mission, very few endured, and many have since faded into obscurity. Released in 2002, Kingdom Hearts was the next big hope, as it leaned on the collective strength of Final Fantasy and numerous Disney properties to tell a brand new story, complete with an original cast of characters. And when it launched, this unlikely pairing of venerable IPs with its focus on action and adventure resonated with players around the world, something that has allowed Square Enix to create a franchise that now contains over a dozen different properties. Needless to say, due to the nature of what Kingdom Hearts is and how it came to be, there are plenty of stories to tell about changes that were made throughout the game's development and why certain decisions were taken. And today, we're going to run through some of the stories that are perhaps lesser known, as well as throwing in some interesting insights and lots of little bonus facts. And in that regard, we're going to start off with our first fact, which relates to the tentative inclusion of Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is without doubt the most recognizable character associated with Disney, and when discussions began around the creation of Kingdom Hearts, the inclusion of such an iconic character would have no doubt been a hotly debated subject, as it would not only help to add validity to the game, but would be exciting on so many levels. Mickey Mouse had starred in numerous video games throughout the 90s, with 4 games produced in the Illusion series and 3 games produced in the Magical Quest series. Many of them, especially Castle of Illusion, were well received, and executives at Square were keen to continue this positive association between Mickey and video games by having him feature as the main protagonist. But Disney, despite their commitment to the project, were unsure if Kingdom Hearts would be a success and were reluctant to allow Mickey to be used in such a manner, as they felt if the game was deemed a failure, then it would create a negative association with Mickey and devalue the character. Their solution was to have Donald Duck be the main character, as even though he was popular, there was much less risk associated, and to ensure Square didn't overstep, a contract was drawn up that made reference to how and when Mickey could be used. In the end, Square chose to use neither Mickey or Donald as the main character, and instead created Sora. But even though Donald still had a strong role, appearing as a supporting character for Sora, the restrictions around the use of Mickey meant the writing team had to be quite particular about how and where the iconic mouse would appear. Tetsuya Nomura revealed in the Kingdom Hearts Ultimania that the restrictions meant that Mickey could not be used for anything more than what would amount to cameo appearances, with the example given being to have Mickey wave from the back of a crowd of people in a town. Due to this limitation, Mickey could only appear in one scene, but Nomura vowed to have it make the greatest impression. The result was the iconic scene of Sora, Rikku, and Mickey shutting the door to darkness together, and with Mickey being revealed as a Keyblade Master. Following the success of Kingdom Hearts, Disney decided to relax these restrictions for future properties, but as an interesting aside here, it was also revealed that Disney actually owns the rights to all the original characters from the Kingdom Hearts franchise. This was discussed as recently as 2017 when John Vignocchi, the then vice president of Disney Interactive, noted that Sora, Rikku and Kairi all live under the roof of the House of Mickey, and that Disney could choose to have them appear in any of their wider properties at any point in the future, should they wish. From the other side of things, Square knew that they would be able to use their own properties however they saw fit. But from the outset, Nomura was keen to only use characters that he had personally worked on, as opposed to pulling in from all over the Final Fantasy franchise. It's why, as the Kingdom Hearts franchise has built out, that there have seldom been characters used from the 8-bit and 16-bit era. Prior to Kefka's appearance in Kingdom Hearts Union Key, Setzer stood as the only exception, but that was because he was one of the few characters that Nomura was responsible for working on within that particular narrative. Despite the restriction, when initial planning was underway on Kingdom Hearts, it still opened the door for numerous Final Fantasy characters to appear, as Nomura had worked on the main character designs for Final Fantasy 7, 8 and 10, and due to how popular those games were, the development staff were spoilt for choice. In the end, they decided upon 9 characters who would appear, but one of them, Yuffie, was a backup choice as opposed to the original intention. In the initial sense, Nomura felt Rikku from Final Fantasy X would be very suitable for Kingdom Hearts due to her bubbly nature, and concept art was produced for her prospective appearance. But as the writers also wanted to call one of the original characters Rikku, they came to the conclusion that it would be far too confusing to have 2 characters with the same name, and sought out an alternative solution. That solution was to replace Rikku from Final Fantasy X with someone else. But the only viable options based on the character archetype were Selphie, who had already been selected, and Yuffie, an optional character from Final Fantasy VII. Still, Yuffie had started to develop something of a cult following due to her cute and adorable sass, and after she was decided upon as a viable alternative, Nomura ported over almost all of the elements from Riku's respective design to Yuffie, no doubt to save time. Rikku did still make her way back in though as part of the Hollow Bastion Restoration Committee in Kingdom Hearts 2, but as she was part of the Gullwings, there wasn't much emphasis on her name due to her association with the group. Another character who was planned to appear in Kingdom Hearts was Tifa Lockhart, although this only relates to Final Mix as opposed to the base game. During development, and long before her design in Advent Children, some of the game designers thought it would be a cool idea to have a melee fighter like Tifa appear as a boss battle. And while the idea did garner some attention, as it would have also built upon the dynamic between Cloud, Sephiroth and Tifa, time was unfortunately not on their side. When Final Mix was released in December of 2002, it did so without Tifa's inclusion, but as the team still felt there was a lot of value in including Tifa, they delayed her first appearance until Kingdom Hearts 2, where she played a key role in the story of Cloud, as well as appearing as a guest party member during the battle for Hollow Bastion, and to work in with that original plan, she also appeared as a boss character in Olympus Coliseum's Underdome. Outside of specific characters, there were also no doubt plenty of discussions related to which other elements of Final Fantasy should be included into the world of Kingdom Hearts. And given the prominence of Disney and how much room they wanted to give to the more original elements, it must have been quite a fine balancing act. Moogles did still manage to creep in, and the quintessential summoning mechanic that had been with Final Fantasy since the third iteration also made an appearance, but the final version of the game did not end up being as closely aligned as had originally been planned. Thinking back, it's easy to see why so many people have such fond memories of the summoning mechanic present in the original Kingdom Hearts, as it allowed Sora to call upon classic Disney characters to aid in battle. This was done at the expense of their party members, but the power they wielded was well worth the sacrifice. Within the context of the game's lore, summons are explained to be crystalline forms of strong characters that did not succumb to darkness when the Heartless destroyed their worlds, and that's why Sora can call them forth into battle. Due to this, numerous Disney characters ended up becoming summonable entities, but in the original plans, they wanted to include a non-Disney summon as well, Bahamut from Final Fantasy. Since his first appearance as a summonable entity in Final Fantasy III, Bahamut had become by far the most popular summon to have ever existed within the franchise, and has often appeared as the most powerful or one of the most powerful available. It therefore made sense for Bahamut to have been considered for inclusion, but for whatever reason, the venerable summon was cut from the final game, and the only evidence we have for what might have been remains in the summons menu should cheat codes be used. Regressing slightly, our next factoid relates to how Kingdom Hearts even came to be in the first place, as there are numerous stories out there as to who spoke to who at what time and also who had the initial spark. But in reality, it was a combination of things. Mario64 was released when work was underway on Final Fantasy VII, and like a lot of gamers around the world, employees at Square, including Nomura, were blown away by how much freedom was granted by the use of the three-dimensional space. Nomura told Satoru Iwata many years later that Mario64 sparked something inside him that wasn't there before. It instilled a desire to make a similar type of game. But when he spoke to his colleagues about this desire, they believed it would be impossible to rival Mario due to how popular the franchise was, unless they were able to leverage an already existing IP, such as a character owned by Disney. At the time, that seemed like a very unrealistic possibility, but a few years later, Nomura overheard Hironobu Sakaguchi and Shinji Hashimoto relaying a conversation they just had with Disney, and without thinking too much about it, a light bulb illuminated in Nomura's brain based on that previous conversation. It led to Nomura asking to be part of the discussions moving forward, as well the impossible scenario he dreamt of now seemed possible, and it represented a legitimate chance for him to realise the objective he'd previously set. At this point, everything was just a pipe dream, and there was nothing concrete at all apart from the loose concept of a collaboration. But having been encouraged by Nomura's optimism, Hashimoto and Sakaguchi agreed to see what he could do with the project. After it was in a certain state, they then pitched the idea they had to Disney, and the rest, as they say, is history. As the project started to build out, and it became much clearer as to how the various Disney properties would be used, thoughts moved over to what such a project could be called. There became an appreciation that to incorporate numerous Disney IPs, there would need to be a notion of worlds that could be travelled between, and as this idea evolved, the development team noted that it was very similar in concept to how Disney theme parks had been set up and expanded upon over the years. Disney World, for example, has Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom, and within those areas are additional zones like Adventureland and Fantasyland, an approach that has been replicated throughout the various offshoot Disneylands that exist around the world. To build upon this concept, the initial plan was to try and have the game be simply called Kingdom. However, despite lots of arm twisting and negotiations, Square was unable to gain the rights to the single term. Feeling it was still quite crucial to the concept though, this led to them exploring alternative names that could build upon the word Kingdom, and after realising the importance of hearts in the game's storyline, the name was changed to reflect the two concepts combined. As another fun fact, the game's original logo was also quite different from what we know today. At the end of the beta trailer, an alternative version of the classic logo could be seen. It had the word Kingdom appearing gold text above the word Heart, which was much larger by comparison. This could perhaps have been because of how the naming convention came about, with the team later deciding that instead of Hearts being a subtitle, the game should just be called Kingdom Hearts. Taking a look at some of the in-game content, even though there would have been members of the development staff responsible for naming almost everything found within the game, some elements were left blank to allow for some interaction with the community. And one such element was a boss which was not present in the original Japanese version of the game. About 4 months prior to the release of the game's North American version, Squaresoft ran a competition called Kingdom Hearts Name in Game. It was a sweepstake that offered a lucky fan the chance to have their name associated with the new boss that was planned to appear in Agrabah. In just 2 weeks, almost 12,000 fans entered the sweepstake, and over the next few months, Squaresoft posted periodical updates that provided hints as to who the winner was, as well as some of the other finalists. They started off, for example, by revealing the states of the finalists and then the state of the winner, and on the 30th of July 2002, it was announced that Kurt Zisa from Medford, New York was the winner of the sweepstake. The reward was immortality within the original North American version of the game and all subsequent versions. And that brings us on to our last fact, which relates to the infamous secret movie that appeared at the end of Kingdom Hearts. In today's landscape, a Kingdom Hearts experience isn't complete without a secret movie, which serves as a tease for what might be in store for the rest of the franchise. But back when Kingdom Hearts came out, the concept of creating a secret movie was pretty unheard of, and in reality it was something of a Hail Mary from the developers as they looked to drum up interest and intrigue relating to the future of what was yet to be cemented as anything other than a single standalone game. What's interesting is that as a creator and director, perhaps due to his artistic background, Nomura often felt the need to create things to help explain what he was looking to achieve. It's a pretty standard practice in terms of marketing to consumers, but as Nomura explained to Iwata, whenever working on projects, he would also create promotional videos to be shared internally. Nomura revealed that outside of discussing various concepts and ideas and creating pictures to explain them in more detail, it's the production of these internal promotional movies that have helped to cement those concepts within the development teams as they help to better convey the sense of style they're hoping to achieve, as well as the type of action. The secret movie in Kingdom Hearts, dubbed Another Side, Another Story, was an extension of this. Even though it was not confirmed that any future Kingdom Hearts properties would be created, Nomura wanted to produce something that shared with the general public ideas he'd had about what a potential sequel might contain. In other words, it was to sell a concept and outline one possible reality for the future of the series, as opposed to being something that was meant to be part of the storyline. Following the success of Kingdom Hearts, future games became a reality, and Kazushige Nojima was left with the interesting task of attempting to find places where the random quotes from the secret movie could be placed within the script of Kingdom Hearts 2. But even now, almost 20 years after the original game has launched, there are still many parts of the secret movie that haven't been explained and perhaps never will be. And with that, I think we're done. They were 7 facts about the original Kingdom Hearts that we feel you probably didn't know, and as always we threw in a load of little bonus facts for good measure. I'm sure though that there are some amongst you who knew them all, but let us know in the comments below which you found to be the most interesting, and of course, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Alright guys, this is Daryl signing out. I hope to see you all again soon for more Kingdom Hearts goodness.